Welcome to the Ingleside Reviews Innovators Unveiled. We're thrilled to take you on a monthly journey into the minds behind the most cutting-edge products hitting the market today. From the coolest gadgets lighting up your Instagram feeds to groundbreaking services revolutionizing our daily lives, we're here to spotlight the innovations and, more importantly, the innovators. So gear up for an energetic and informative ride as we delve deep into the stories, the challenges, and the triumphs of the creative geniuses shaping our future. This is Ingleside Reviews Innovators Unveiled. And now your host, A.D. Edwards.
Hi, and welcome to another exciting episode of Ingleside Reviews Innovators Unveiled. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Henry Woodman, the entrepreneur who revolutionized the hospitality industry with the ICE portal, the Internet Content Exchange portal. This groundbreaking platform transformed new hotels and how they manage and distribute visual content, setting new standards for guest engagement. Exiting his company that he founded with a remarkable 20 times its annual income. Henry's entrepreneurial journey is a testament to strategic thinking, innovation, and perseverance. But before we dive into his achievements, let's start with Henry's roots, his early inspirations, and the journey that brought him to where he is today. Henry, welcome to our show.
Well, thank you, Mr. Edwards. I hope I can live up to all those accolades. And, you forgot to include Lucky Bastard in there as one of those. So I have to say, everybody who's made anything of themselves has been lucky along the way. If they say they aren't, they're full of shit.
Well, you know what they say, Henry. Luck and opportunity is when preparation meets opportunity. Basically, that's what luck is. If you ask me, because you were prepared and it came and you were ready.
That's right.
Now, before we talk, I want to get into your history and how you got it to be an entrepreneur. But I think it's very important to understand that most guests of this show, either viewing or listening, are familiar with what you started, the ICE portal. So people who are listening and watching, the ICE portal is basically the platform that you use whenever you book a hotel, whenever you, especially in the hospitality industry, it's what allows major hotel chains to have their pictures and videos of the hotel rooms on different other third-party exchanges, as well as their own homepage. Did I explain that well, Henry?
Yeah, pretty well. I'll add to that. I mean, if you want, you could get a job in sales, no worries. So really what it is, you don't know the name ICE Portal. You've probably never even heard or care about it. But when you go to any travel website on the planet, you see pictures of a hotel. They would have come from our servers. And the reason is way back in the day, we're talking decades ago, back when the brick and mortar travel agencies would book a hotel, they had a green screen with very cryptic text and there were no pictures. Internet comes along, they upload this rate and availability stuff to the internet, but they don't have pictures. So it became a challenge. It wasn't so bad early on at 28.8 or 56K dial-ups, but as it progressed, they needed visuals. And so we provided the sizing, tagging, categorizing, and essentially delivery for all of the major hotel companies and representation companies so that they would allow us to ping their database, we'd do our magic, and we'd send it to the Expedia's, bookings, and, AD travels of the world. I don't know if there is an AD travel, but I'm making it up. You get the idea.
I like the sound of that, Henry. We'll go with it. Let me ask a few questions about how you became an entrepreneur in the beginning. First, let's start with your background, your upbringing. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like?
I had a pretty normal middle-class America childhood. I was born in South Florida, spent a couple of years in my early, 1 to 2 years old, which of course I don't remember, in Europe, and then moved back to South Florida where I was raised most of my childhood.
So were you entrepreneurial as a kid?
Yeah, I think so. As a 13-year-old, I was a swimmer, so I went to Mexico to a swim meet. I came back with a switchblade. Again, this is 1973. You could do that. You could actually bring a knife on a plane. And so I come back and I'm trying to impress my friends in junior high, and I'm pushing this button and the blade pops out, and they thought it was the coolest thing ever, right?
Right.
So, of course, I get a ticket at 13. I go back to Mexico City. I buy a couple of boxes of switchblades. I come back and I sell them. I buy them at $3 and $4, and I sell them at $15 and $18. And I sell them out like within a week, right? That was sort of my first, I don't want to say entrepreneurial journey, but, dipping my toes into the water. And, while in high school, I also had I was into photography. So I had a black, a dark room in my bathroom, and I would take pictures of the neighborhood pets. It was called pet portraits. I would develop them and I would give them an 8x10, 5x7, and they would pay me for that, right? And then so fast forward into college, it was really my own addiction. At the time, I was hopelessly addicted to Pac-Man, the video game machine. And
Yes,
there I am
yes.
as a sophomore in college. I'm sitting in a laundromat with a pocket full of quarters. I don't want to crack the books. And so I'm thinking, man, this place could really use a video game like Pac-Man. I go back to my dorm room. I call every laundromat in Tucson. I have to pull out the yellow pages, of course. And I say, hey, do you guys have video games? And they would say no. And eventually I'd say, would you like one? Thinking, oh, well, let me put one in there. I was just trying to fulfill a problem I had. And so by the time I graduated a few years later, I had, video games in many of the laundromats around Tucson. That was my little niche, right? So that was my early entrepreneurial sort of opportunistic ties.
So, how did you come up with these ideas or think about business at an early age? Did you have a mentor, someone influenced you, or what? What happened?
Listen, I was a teenager at the sort of opportunistic. I didn't really think of it as a business, much less an opportunity. I can get a couple of bucks, or I could satisfy my own need and play the games, which, in the laundromat, ironically, the games, I never got to play because every time I went in to get money and think I would play one of my games, somebody was playing the game and I couldn't say, excuse me, let me play for free and take your quarters, or, you know, so I couldn't dip into my own, what do they call it?
You couldn't get
Doji
high
work.
off your own supply?
Yeah, I couldn't get high off my supply. So I really never, it was never really an ongoing concern where there was a business and a structure and HR and operations. It was like a one-man band, buying switchblades, selling switchblades, taking pictures, doing pictures. The only thing I had with the video games, I mean, they were self-contained. I would move them around every couple of weeks because, listen, I bought some really horrible machines, and I knew the people playing would go, man, this was horrible. And I'd come back a couple of weeks later and it was a new game and they'd get excited. So I would move them around, and there was a guy moonlighting there was an IBM campus in Tucson, and he was moonlighting there to help fix the machines from time to time when they would break down. That was pretty much, my entire operation.
Well, that's interesting because even though you said it was a one-man band, so to speak, I'm sure you learned some lessons even from those early ventures. So, what were the key takeaways from those youth inspired entrepreneurial um,
Yeah.
sessions?
I think looking back, the key takeaways were really, is there a problem that you can solve? One, is there an opportunity here that you can take advantage of? Because, obviously there was a problem for me that I'm solving with video games. It's not like they didn't exist. If you wanted to play, you'd go to a mall that had an arcade, or you'd go to a 7-Eleven that would have a couple of games. I mean, that was just the way it was, right? This is the late 70s, early 80s. And then I would think luck, right? Being at the right place at the right time, which is kind of odd because, you don't know what the right place and the right time is. Much of your life, you're at the right place at the wrong time, or you're at the wrong place at the right time. And then every now and then, if you look back and you see how the dots have connected, you happen to have been at the right place at the right time,
Mm-hmm.
which means you just got to get out there and do stuff.
Yes, yes. So you jumped from switchblades photography, and now you're doing I would say technology, and I would categorize video games as tech. How would you say your education or your professional experiences shaped your future in the technology business, or did it have any impact at all?
Didn't have any impact at all. As a matter of fact, I couldn't write a line of code. If you would have told me back then I was going to run a tech company, I would have thought you were crazy. I have no interest in tech. And at the time, I was into media. I wanted to, when I was in college, I wanted to go to Los Angeles and produce and direct movies. I did go to Los Angeles. I didn't get into producing and directing movies. Eventually I was doing travel films started as a PA, a production assistant, and eventually worked my way up and started producing travel films. At which point, I was in Chile in Latin America, and it was just before Pinochet left, and it became a democracy from Pinochet's dictatorship. So after that, I thought, well, let me call up the production company I used in Chile and see if I can get a meeting with the new television stations that needed content. And I would go down and pitch a game show. So that leads then to the next opportunity, which I'm now in Chile. I partnered with a production company. I pitch a show idea that I ripped off from a U.S. Game show,
Uh-huh.
and a few months later, there I am in Chile producing a game show as the executive producer, right? Which then, of course, leads to I'm sitting in Chile and somebody hands me a CD-ROM. I put it into the computer and I can look at this virtual reality tour, where I can go up and down and all around. And I'm like, wow, mind blowing. I mean, I looked at this and I went, man, all that production stuff I was doing, I could do it with one camera, just me, instead of five guys and 17 pieces of luggage and all this pain in the butt. And I could just travel around the world shooting virtual tours. Whoa. So I set up a company called World Travel Vision, right? We're doing virtual tours. We're giving clients CD-ROMs. They take them to the conferences and the trade shows. And eventually, they say, these are the hotels and the destinations, hey, how do we get this stuff on this new World Wide Web thingy? It's like the mid to late 90s. And I'm like, I don't know, send them a CD-ROM, right? What do I know? And they say, yeah, they don't have any standards. They don't know what to do with it. So I start saying, all right, listen, let me see what I can do to help. And I start looking into it and I realize virtual tours, we can send them a link with an applet and play the tour, but the real challenge is photos. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't have a mechanism for the photos.
Right.
So this is where another pivot comes in place, from production of virtual tours to distribution of virtual tours to now the distribution of photos, which was 25 years in the making. We essentially go from this to this to this, and then we end up being the image management and distribution back end for the hospitality industry. So when I say I don't know technology, I had to hire smarter people than myself to say, listen, here's what we're trying to do, and here's where we're going. And the vision is to be able to, make people see the hotels before they go. And it was all sort of connecting the dots because of opportunities that presented themselves along the way.
Exactly. And the ability to manage, delegate, and get key people on board played a big role in that, I'm sure. Now,
Yes, sir.
so that basically inspired. Did that inspire the idea of the ice portal, the invention of the
Yeah,
way
without a doubt. I mean, Ice
doing
Portal
things with
really,
CD-ROMs?
yeah, it really grew out of that. It wasn't so much an inspiration as a slap in the face of reality where, how do you deliver this? Okay, we can do that. And then, oh, there's a bigger problem. And if you look at travel sites nowadays, they don't even have virtual tours because they don't want to get in the way of see hotel, check price, click book, right?
Yes.
So that just takes them away
Yes.
from the fun. So when we look at that and we say, okay, the need to have is photos. You're probably not going to book a hotel you don't know or a brand you don't know, like a Hilton or a Hyatt or something. And it's like Henry's Hotel. Yeah, show me pictures. right? I need to
Yes.
see what it looks like. Is it clean? Is it on the river? Is it on the ocean? Whatever. So the need to have was where we were focusing our attention. And because there were so many travel websites with multiple languages and multiple codes and needs, that we said, listen, you can't possibly satisfy all of these sites, right? We'll connect to all the sites. You just give us access to your database and we'll do the magic and send it out. So it was also easier from a logistics perspective to have one client, let's say Wyndham. Wyndham was a client that had 9,700 hotels. The hotels had no idea who we were. They would give the images to Wyndham. Wyndham would put it in their database. Once it's approved, it gives it to us and we send it to every website. So the Wyndham down the street would say, hey, somehow Wyndham got my pictures on Expedia and Booking and, Fred's Travel. They don't care. They're paying Booking, obviously management and franchise fees, and they're supposed to do those things, and they pay vendors to do those things like Ice Portal.
Now, Henry, that's interesting because I'm always on these sites, and the wife and I are taking trips, and it's very useful. It goes along with the reading the ratings as well, being able to see the hotel, not only the lobby but the appearance of the rooms. Now, question for you: when I'm on these realtor sites looking for homes, and they do the virtual tours, is that the ICE portal or is that something different?
It is not Ice Portal, and we made a decision not to pursue that because you have to say no to certain things to be the best at one thing. And the reason for that is that if you think of real estate, that house is got a virtual tour or photos, it's sold, see you later. Those pictures become there's no need for them. They become non-existent, right? A
Yes.
hotel and a hotel room needs to sell that every single day, 365 days a year, no matter what. So that becomes omnipresent. If it were somebody and we were hosting and delivering pictures of a house in a month or two or however long it takes to sell, they're no longer going to pay us because they don't need us, right? So
Understood.
it's a far more lucrative SaaS model, software as a service, to have an ongoing, Wyndham would pay us for every hotel every month, regardless of whether they changed a picture or not.
Understood. Understood. Now, you started this remarkable company, and it's an interesting story. But for our listeners and viewers, a practical question: how did you get the initial buy-in for such a technology-focused solution in an industry not known for early adoption? Because the whole hospitality industry don't do a lot of changes.
Yeah. I'm gonna say it was an evolution because, as I mentioned, we started with just producing, like photographers shooting virtual tours, to then distributing the virtual tours, which allowed us to get access to some of those travel sites, right? So if we say to Expedia or Orbitz or Travelocity, hey, we have these virtual tours, can we deliver them? We at least know the players in the space, right?
Yes.
And so then when we were looking at the photo component, there was another company doing similar things. And we said, hey, listen, we would also like to get involved with the photo aspect, right? And they're like, yeah, whatever. And one of the early adopters for our technology was Starwood, right? So I'd say, look, we have Starwood hotels, and they'd like, yeah, that's nice. They have 1,000 hotels. We have 100,000. I'm like, yeah, but we have a much deeper thing, and eventually they'd say yes, right? So, like I said, this is not something that all of a sudden we built technology and everybody adopted it. No, not at all. It took decades, right? We built a little crappy technology on Cold Fusion. We sent links with URLs to travel sites with different IDs for their, branding. And then eventually we decided to look into the photo thing. So we revamped the management and delivery system. We had to connect to APIs. So there were a series of growth spurts along the way in order to get to that final destination. Now, the final destination always was, we want to be able to manage and distribute the photos in the travel industry for every hotel on the planet, right?
Yes.
And that meant
That's a lot of
having to,
hotels.
yeah,
That,
yeah, having to go to conferences and we would present ourselves, and eventually, after being there for so many years, people would say, okay, they haven't They haven't gone bankrupt yet. Let's take them seriously. Okay, what exactly do you do? Like, give me a demo. And, I'd make calls. I say, listen, I'm going to be in town for, a couple of meetings, which was a lie. I just wanted to meet with them. And I'd fly there and I'd do a demo. And, many of the times they'd know who we were. And eventually, we'd catch on.
So it was a gradual thing, inch by inch.
Ah,
So
yeah.
it couldn't have been all smooth sailing. What were some of those challenges?
Oh, no. Yeah. Yeah. As they say, it was slow and then all of a sudden. But I think the biggest challenges were really convincing people that we could deliver, one, that we wouldn't be out of business, two, that our technology wouldn't fail them. Now, our technology wasn't mission critical, meaning we did not have to display the pictures on, let's say, Booking or Expedia, right? We would deliver them to Expedia and Booking and all the other databases in the specs that they requested, size and tagging and categories and naming conventions and IDs and stuff, right? So we already knew all that. That's what our software did. Once we dumped it to Expedia, they would show it. So the challenges really were maintaining our technology up to date because we stored millions of images and being able to stay current with many of the IDs. The hotel IDs change from vendor to vendor. The types of rooms change. One could be a suite, one could be a junior suite, one could be a standard something or other in Europe, or with breakfast, without breakfast. There were so many different options that the software had to do. So from a technology perspective, sounds easy. Take a picture and send it to this database. But there were all kinds of information that was tagged with that photo. And our platform needed to deliver, right? And that means our IT guys and the support would have to satisfy the needs of hotels of saying, look, I updated a picture 3 days ago. Why is it not on Expedia or something like that, right? And so generally, it would have to go through the approval process for the brand and then to us, and then the approval process from Expedia. It was a process.
At what point did you feel that you had something that could revolutionize the industry?
When somebody gave me a check and bought the company. No, the truth is, we had one competitor and they had a lock on the industry. They had an exclusive for 5 years with what's called the GDSs, the global distribution systems like Sabre, Amadeus, and stuff. And so we were locked out of the main funnel for the travel agents, right? Starwood took a chance on us. As I mentioned, they were our first client and said, we like you guys. Can you do it? So we had to essentially hobble through that, right? When those exclusives ended, along the way, we would meet with hotel groups and we would say, listen, tell us what's working, what's not working, what we can improve on. And we're building this technology. What are you looking for? And so when the when the competitors' exclusives ended, we went from Starwood, about 1,000 hotels, to 22,000 hotels within the span of a year, right? So we exploded, and we knew more were coming online because when the competitors' contracts with other companies would expire, they were looking to come to us for a variety of reasons. So we knew once that shift started that we were going to be okay, right? Because if they didn't and the competitor they were happy with the competitor, we would not be having this conversation. But the competitor was a de facto monopoly at the time. They got arrogant, they got complacent. We came in, we did a better product, and eventually took over their leadership position. So, and the long answer to the question is, after that, and we started literally 2 years after that, we were approached by several bigger companies interested in acquiring us, and I wasn't ready. And eventually, one came in and made an offer I couldn't refuse.
Understood. Can you share a particular success story?
Probably the last one that I mentioned. First of all, I would be forever indebted for Starwood. And I think Starwood saw that if they didn't pick one other option, it would be I guess, a monopoly by that one company, because the company could dictate the prices and the strategy. And so they said, no, we like you guys. Can you do it? So we had to manually do a lot of stuff for the Starwood hotels for years, right? And so once the exclusives ended and we went, the next big group that converted was Wyndham. So, that was 9,000 some odd hotels. So that in and of itself gave us a huge leg up because all the others, the Choices, the Best Westerns, the Hiltons, all started to come online within the coming years. So once that started happening, we realized that was the turning point.
So how many people started out initially when you had the company to create the ICE portal?
Well, initially it was myself as the photographer of the virtual tours with World Travel Vision. Then eventually when we evolved, we had another guy and a girl. So there were three of us, right? The guy was doing some IT stuff to create the digital brochures to distribute the virtual tours. Then the woman was essentially the office manager, CF. I mean, she was pretty much everything to keep the HR, whatever. There's no HR to keep the operation going, right? Then eventually we ended up creating a platform, which we did in Cold Fusion. We hired a programmer. So then we morphed into, we had photographers and then we hired more photographers. At some point we had 6 photographers traveling around taking pictures and virtual tours. Then we had to fire the photographers and focus on the thing. So we went from like 1, 2, 3 and kept growing and pivoting and morphing to when I sold the company, there were 27 of us.
27. So, yeah, the reason I asked that, Henry, is because a lot of listeners and viewers want to know about scaling their company. And that's very crucial to the success of the company, especially on your level when you have to go out and visit all of the different hotels and get photographs and get information. I'm just curious as to how the scaling progressed.
So, first we didn't go to hotels and take photos. I mean, early on we did, but once we were collecting and delivering, somebody else would take the photos, we'd connect to their database, pull it down, and then send it all around the world. So at the end of the day, when I was starting out, I had no idea how to run a business, right? I mean, an ongoing concern like this. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to get my MBA in entrepreneurship. I'm in my 50s, mind you, and I'm thinking, I've got those 5 years that my competitor had an exclusive. Let me learn how to run a business. While I'm there, somebody also gives me a book and said, hey, you should read this. I think it would be very helpful. It's a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. And it became my Bible, right? So early on, when people would say, hey, you need to hire the best people, I'm like, shit, I can't even pay myself. What do you mean hire the best people? I can't afford that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to have a culture. I'm like, I don't even know what that means, right? You need to have KPIs. And I'm thinking, yeah, sure. And I'm thinking, what the hell is a KPI? I don't know what a KPI is. So eventually I would find all of these things and how to literally put processes and procedures into place, document them, understand what the vision meant and how to share where we're going and how we're going to get there with the team. And so that the team was all on board. It's an ongoing learning process, but I got to say, Traction was probably the Bible for me to start that scaling process.
I'll be sure to put a link to that book on the YouTube channel. You have to make, as an entrepreneur, decisions that can be the life or the death of the company. What were some most critical decisions you made during the scaling process?
I'm going to say I was fortunate that I didn't know how to raise money, which essentially means had I known how to raise money and I did raise money, I probably would have spent it on stupid things and bankrupted the company. I firmly believe that because, when you have to make do and you end up bootstrapping, you learn how to make do without or how to maximize certain things. I don't know that I can look back and say this particular thing was a crucial uh, pivot point or mistake or advantage. All along the way, there were a lot of little hurdles and mountains to overcome that would help me improve, whether it's a process, a procedure, a KPI, an employee. the things I learned, really, a lot of the employees that I got from larger companies expected all of these things to be in place, whereas I would say, no, this is you're wearing multiple hats. You have to do that. We're creating these things as we go. And so they didn't really get that whole startup mentality as much as younger, hungrier people, which I really appreciated. So I think, as you go along the way, you just keep wash, rinse, repeat, do it again,
Mm-hmm.
wash, rinse, repeat. And as you say, opportunity finds itself on the corner of prepared and lucky. And so
Yes.
I was very
Yes.
lucky, and we were always prepared in the end, at least, and opportunity came by.
So during the scaling process, you're building a team. The team is increasing in number. When you put your team together, some people want to know, is it most important to get skills, or do you look for people who have great attitudes and try to train them? When you approach building a team and fostering the culture to share the vision that you have for the company, how did you go about building your team?
Yeah, I got to be honest. I believe that the latter is probably more important. There's a lot of people with great skills, and if they have a shitty attitude and they don't fit the culture, well, you're going nowhere, right? If you got the right person, and they got the right attitude, and they're hungry and they're smart enough to learn things, I think you're better off in the long run. Now, I got really lucky with some of the early employees, and I knew that I did. And so instead of saying, listen, I really like you, I want to give you more money, I would say, listen, I like you, I want to give you more money, but I can't afford the money now. So I would like to give you what's called phantom stock, right? And so many of the employees that I wanted to retain were well aware of the fact that one day we were going to sell the company. And if we did, they would get a little bit of money on the sale, which is the phantom stock. The phantom stock also, if we lose any money or we make money, they don't have to worry about the tax consequences because they're not equity holders. That's the good news. The bad news is that it's ordinary income to them.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, the good news for an investor, the phantom stockholders would vest over 2 years, meaning if I sell the company, the stockholder or the phantom stockholder would get a quarter every 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get the full amount, right, in 2 years, right? And so the investor would say, listen, I don't want these guys to leave. And if they do, I'm pretty much, I'm screwed. They have the intellectual, they know stuff,
Yes.
right? They know what everything's happening. And they're not going to leave because they want that money. And if they leave, they forfeit that money. So it's a win-win-win.
Interesting, especially from a guy who said he knew nothing about raising money and takeovers. You did pretty good with that.
Well, I learned this. Yeah, this was learned later on when you go. Listen, you go and you get your MBA and you talk to people and you start to understand. Nowadays with AI, I'm sure you could ask AI, "How do I best structure?" and it'll give you 1,000 answers or something.
Yeah, AI, that's a whole nother discussion. People use AI for everything nowadays. It's interesting. What role did partnerships or collaborations play in the success of the ICE portal in your company?
Well, I think partnerships and collaborations are huge. I mean, we often would look at whether we're providing symbiotic relationships. I mean, listen, at the early on, when I mentioned that we were going to trade shows and conferences, we couldn't afford these trade shows and conferences. So what we did is we partnered with the trade shows, the conferences, and we said, listen, you guys need photography of the events. We have photographers. If you allow us, we'll go with a photographer and ourselves as an attendee and get a booth. So we'll trade a hotel room for me and my photographer, a booth, and attendance badges for us in exchange for photography of the entire event. And you know what? They said yes. Cost me next to nothing because I am already paying the employee, right? He's an employee. And the photography, I mean, it's all digital. So we got a great deal to essentially meet all of the prospective customers or people that we were looking at, and being there with a booth to give a little bit of credibility to the brand for years.
I was just thinking that was a great collaboration. It was valuable, especially in the long run, for what you all were doing. That was very smart business and savvy. Here's a question about the exit. Let's talk about the exit for a little bit. You were able to sell the ICE portal for 20 times his annual income. Now, that's an incredible achievement. What steps did you take to prepare the business for the sale?
I polished my lucky star gemstone. I got to tell you, earlier on, as I was doing the processes and stuff, we were very, very good about documenting everything, because I said early on in the company, I said, listen, imagine that we're going to have a franchise office in Europe and they never get to talk to you. All they have to know exactly what happens here and how things work and what connects to what is the documentation. So I want to ensure that we're well documented with all of the processes and procedures and maintained up to date. Now, keep in mind, all of this was online. So, how we connect to an API, that API changes. It's got to change too. So everything we had was extremely well documented, right? And so when somebody came around, we did not prepare essentially for the sale. I did know when people started sniffing around that it was going to happen at some point. I raised my salary significantly so that when they came on, they would keep me on for a couple of years at that salary. That was first thing. Second thing, when they approached me, I was making good money. I didn't have to sell the company. So they came and said, look, we're interested. And I knew what I wanted because I had a number up on my mirror for a decade. I knew exactly what I wanted to sell the company for. And they'd say, we're interested. And I'd say, yeah, me too. But you know what? I don't think I'm there yet. I honestly believe that. I said, I need to be at a higher revenue to get a bigger multiple, because, I have a number, right? And then, yeah, what's your number? And I'd say the number and they'd laugh and leave, right? And then at one point, a company says, yeah, no, thank you. And they call me a month later and they say, can we meet in Atlanta at our corporate headquarters? It's a multi-billion-dollar international company. And so I say, sure. We fly to Atlanta. They fly the CFO in, they fly a COO in, and they start throwing out all these numbers. And I said, listen, guys, I'm going to be honest with you. I make great money. I have no boss. I have no board. I have no investors expecting things. I'm pretty happy. Today you will overpay for something you will underpay for tomorrow. I really believe that, right?
Yes.
This is my number. And I didn't have any pressure to do this. And they looked at each other and, it's probably 5 or 10 seconds, felt like 2 minutes. They just said, fine, you got a deal.
Just like that. Now,
just that.
the
No investment banker. 60 days later, the lawyers work it all out. Money's transferred to the bank.
Okay. That's I wonder how common that is. It's probably rare that happens.
No, it's really rare. I mean, there's prepared and lucky as shit an opportunity right there.
What do you think were some of the contributing factors that made the ICE portal so attractive to buyers?
Well, simple. We had, almost 70,000 hotels at the time. We were a SaaS model. We had 72% net margins, and it was a little cash machine. And all we had is opportunity. If you look at the market at the time, there were, the Airbnbs and the vacation rental community also having needs and expanding. And so we looked at it and said, listen, beyond the hotel world, 100,000 hotels, if you will, there's also a much larger market with vacation rentals. And so once you tie into our platform and we're doing this for you, it's like getting married. It's really hard to get divorced. You got to separate the technologies, you got to do all that. So in a SaaS model, they just keep paying you on and on and on, and it's negligible needs to improve on the technology. The prices of technology came down in storage with Amazon Web Services. So The costs for us were getting less, and we could always incrementally increase the cost to the clients because of the value proposition. So for them, it was a good business. And they were also looking to expand into hospitality. And, they immediately get 70,000 hotels. So, you can't build it and connect because of the factors that it's going to take so long. You just buy it.
Yes.
Right. You pay a premium.
That's why it's a
strategic partner.
That's why. Okay. That makes sense as to why it was attractive to them. But at this point, as you mentioned, you're relatively comfortable. You're making good money. Easy street. How did you know it was the right time to exit?
I didn't. They said they'd give me the number I wanted, and I knew that once I got there, I could live the rest of my life without much of a worry. Because at the end of the day, I sat down years earlier with my brother and I said, how much money would we need to live comfortably? I mean, not yachts and jets and shit, but live comfortably for the rest of our life without a single worry and not having to make more money.
Right.
Okay. And I go, okay. And then we doubled that amount because, you're not that smart and taxes and shit like that. That was my number.
Oh.
Right. So I knew this is all I needed to live my life. Right. I didn't expect, I'm going to make more money on other things or this is going to turn into something else. No, that's all I needed. And that was a year before COVID. Now, you know what happened with hospitality and COVID. So, the right time, right place.
The hospitality industry.
That's right. That's right.
So what advice would you give an entrepreneur about planning a successful exit strategy?
So first of all, prepare. They will give you multiple pages. I mean, we had all of the information. I think they had 3 single-spaced pages of needs, and within 48 hours, everything was in the data room, right? So I would say if you're looking to exit, first of all, strategic partners, know what your value proposition is. And secondly, be prepared with all of the information that they want, right? Not just simple stuff like the cap table and, client lists and stuff like that, but whatever other operating documents that they would request, it should be there. It'll impress them because they're like, wow, and these are guys that were well funded. They had bought other companies and they had never seen anybody upload that stuff within 48 hours. So I think they were impressed by the fact that we already had it together. So we didn't need to put shit together and build stuff, right? Oh, give me another couple of weeks, So prepare and know exactly what you need to get out and try to come at it from a position of strength. The last thing you want to do is like, man, I really need to make this deal happen because I've got bills to pay and I've got investors that are upset and man, they're going to take advantage of you.
So to leave the expertise in your hands, I want to know if you feel this is a good illustration. You have 2 cars that are pre-owned, but one owner, he kept the documents from the oil being changed every 3,000 miles. He had the tires rotated. He had all the maintenance schedule handled and had the receipts to show it versus someone who doesn't. Is that would you say that's fair analogy?
Yeah, that's pretty good. And also he created a Carfax for you to show that it's never been in an accident and that you can trust what he's delivering is what you're paying for.
Right. Now, looking back, is there any decisions or moments that you would have approached differently with the company?
You always want to look back and say, yes, had I seen that they were going to do these exclusives, what would I have done differently? And then the answer to the question is, whatever decision I would have made might have turned out differently. Fortunately for me, I was lucky. I capitalized on my competitors' mistakes while I was sitting there waiting for exclusives to end. Had I gone in and not had them do exclusives and been a competitor, would I have been as good? I don't know, right? The only thing I would look back and say, because it ended up well, so you have to say, yeah, whatever, decisions and things that happened, it's good turnout. Hell, don't change anything, right? I think I would look back and say, try to minimize the amount of stress that you dealt with.
Interesting. Interesting. I ask that to the entrepreneurs that I interview, and the answers are different. But I've heard a couple of people say that. They say eliminate the stress or enjoy your family life and other things, because as entrepreneurs you get engrossed in the business, and you know, you look back, you say, I wish I would have done this a little bit differently. Now I would say that you're very successful. You've done exactly what many entrepreneurs wish to do. You had a number, you hit it. I'm sure you learned so many lessons. What's the most valuable lesson you've learned throughout your entrepreneurial career? And you
Well, I'm
can't
going to
say
say
luck,
probably,
Henry. I'm not going to let you. I'm not going to let you
yeah,
say luck.
luck. Well, luck is in everybody. Listen, it's anybody who's done anything successful has to have found luck. But, I would probably say, one, are you solving a problem? Let's first start with the basic. Is this an issue that you're making better for you or the world or anybody else like that? So, two, networking. You know, I find that, you find, as I mentioned early on, right place, right time, but it doesn't always happen. Most of the time, you're in the right place at the wrong time, or the wrong place at the right time. So you just need to keep networking, keep going out there, pressing the flesh, as it were, and finding those opportunities, because eventually they will lead to that right place and right time. So it's not something that I would say, hey, listen, you got a great idea. Next thing overnight, you're going to be a success. Eh, Not really.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to put in the hard work. You've got to go through the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, which is a journey and something that, had I known then what I know now, I probably would have done something differently, because there was a lot of pain and suffering and house mortgaged and thinking, I may not make it to next month, and I can't pay myself. I'm gonna have to pay the employees. I'm gonna take a mortgage on my house. Yeah, there were a lot of you know peaks and valleys.
So would you say that your success with the ice portal shaped your perspective on risk taking?
Absolutely.
In what
Yeah,
way?
I have a lot of respect for people who put it on the line, and I got to be honest. The earlier you do it, the less you have to lose. You don't have that far to fall, if you will. But when you're older, you have a house, you have a family, mortgage. You're like, gee, if I lose it all, what am I going to end up on the streets? That's kind of scary, right? So those people that can and take advantage of it, I'd say when you have less to lose when you're younger, but always do that, but learn. That's looking back. The last thing you want to do is saying, God, I wish I would have taken the chance.
Mm.
Even if I would have failed, then at least I know, right? And sadly, when you start something and you look at the failure rates, first of all, you think, yeah, I know, but not me. I'm special, right? You don't look at it because you're in denial,
Right.
and that's the reality.
So would you say your success with the ice portal change your perspective on leadership at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot more respect for people who have bootstrapped than people who go out and say, hey, listen, I got a great idea. Here's my pre-money valuation of $15 million. And I'm like, what do you mean? From an idea? What the hell am I missing?
Right.
Right? Or the people who have been in corporate America and they're doing really well. Yeah, but you have an established, well designed brand that has been churning this thing, and you might have some good ideas. But I think true leaders from startup and bootstrap, I have a lot of respect for, because that is a hard road.
Right. Understood. I would agree with that totally. You kind of answered this question, but I want to revisit it because we talked about what you would probably do different. How did you balance your professional ambitions with personal fulfillment? Because as entrepreneurs, like I said before, you get engulfed in the company, you get engulfed in the work, but you still have maybe a wife, maybe children, maybe a spouse, a husband. How did you balance the professional with the personal?
Yeah. Shit, there could be children from places I don't even know. Who knows?
Oh,
Yeah.
come on,
And
Henry.
that's, uh, um, but the truth of the matter is, early on when I started the virtual tour company World Travel Vision that I mentioned, I was working my ass off, 6, 7 days a week till all hours. And it caused there were issues. My first wife and I divorced, right? I was never at home. I didn't care because I was so focused on the business. Later with the second business, and I would ask people that I would meet along the way that were successful. I'm like, all right, so give me some advice, help me, mentor me, right? And much of the time, they would always say the last thing you want to do is neglect and miss your child growing up. Put some guardrails around, I'm going to be home on weekends. I'm going to be home at certain times of night to have dinner. And so I made an effort to take some time for myself, working out, right? Try to be healthy, eating healthy, going to the house at a decent hour to spend time with my wife and my daughter, and weekends, right? And so it's not that I wanted to. Occasionally, they'd go to bed and I'd wake up in the middle of the night with a panic attack and I'd go to the computer and I'd send off emails. But the reality was I would make concerted efforts to put the structure around the personal life so that I would not miss certain things.
Yes, that's great advice. Let's talk about the future for a couple of minutes. Are you exploring any new ventures or industries as of now?
Yes, I am. So I'll give you the short. Some 40 years ago, when I moved to Los Angeles, thinking I wanted to produce and direct movies, I bought the rights to a book with the idea that I was going to make a movie out of it. Well, that never happened, but I still have the rights to the book. I just published it last summer. It's done very well on Amazon. I'm developing that concept. The book, by the way, is called The Reincarnation of Marie. And the concept is being converted into a series called Slippin', which is a play on slipping through time, reincarnation, time travel, sort of figment of your imagination. It's a very trippy idea of this guy who finds his soulmate only to find that she died 70 years earlier. He read about her in a journal, and then he found her reincarnation. So it's a series that I'm now trying to develop to stream on TV. Now, there's a list of showrunners, people who have done similar type things, that I am trying to get attracted to the project. If that doesn't happen in 8 or 9 months, then the next step, this is where I love this world, is AI text to video. That 18 to 24 months from now, it will be so good that the streamers, the Amazons and Netflixes and the Apples of the world will say, listen, economically speaking, I can do an AI project for a fraction of the cost and much faster than the old school methodology. So why not understand that economically, this is where it's going to go?
So, Henry, would you by chance have a copy of the book that you can show the viewers?
Of course.
Nice. And what I want to do, Henry, is put a link on this show's YouTube page for purchase of the book so our readers and viewers can get a chance to look at that. So I guess this AI trend, my last question was about what trends and innovations excite you most about future of technology or the future of hospitality.
I don't do much, even though I've invested in a couple of companies that are hospitality worlds. Once you know an industry, you're like, geez, well, how dysfunctional is that? Right? But in my opinion, AI is a game changer. You remember back in the early days of the internet before 2001 when, the dot-com crash came, everybody thought, yeah, well, it's kind of nice, but yeah. And then eventually they'd say, yeah, this is game changing. This AI components are game changing. And I'll tell you why I say that. I uploaded a PDF copy of the book, and literally in seconds, it delivered an audio, sort of a podcast between a guy and a woman talking about the books, the insightful nature and objective discussions about different parts of the book were, to me, amazing that they were so intuitive. I could not believe AI can do that today. And this is at its infancy. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So this is an awesome discussion about the ICE portal, about technology, about scaling your business, about the things that you've learned. I thank you so much for taking the time to put us on this fascinating journey through your entrepreneur success. You know, when you scaled the business and you made plans to exit in a strategic way, it was incredibly inspiring. I knew this is something that the audience would be very much interested in. So to our listeners, I hope you've been motivated to pursue your own bold ideas and approach challenges that feel that these are things that I'm gonna have to do this whole thing. I'm gonna do my conclusion over. I'm gonna do a lot of editing. You know, it says that you change your device. Did you change your device, Henry?
No, I haven't touched anything.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let me
It
do.
says changes in my devices, so I don't fucking know.
I don't know. It's technology. It's still growing. I know one thing is I got all the components I need, and they don't have Comcast does not have fiber in the area that I live in, and I used to have fiber at my old place. I hate this.
I'm with you, man. I agree. We're putting fiber into my community. I feel the same way.
So let me go ahead and wrap up this conclusion right quick. Henry, thank you for taking us on this fascinating journey through your entrepreneurial success with the ICE portal, your insights into innovation, scaling businesses, and planning a strategic exit, inspiring to us all. To our listeners, I hope you've been motivated to pursue your own bold ideas and approach challenges with the same level of determination. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and rate this podcast. And as always, keep innovating, keep creating, and never stop unveiling the innovator in you. Until next time, I'm your host, A.D. Edwards, signing off.
You've been listening to Ingleside Review's Innovators Unveiled. Our passion is to take you on a journey into the minds behind the most cutting-edge products hitting the market today. It's an honor to have on the show the creative geniuses shaping our future. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. Hit our website at inglesidereviews.com. On Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Ingleside Reviews. And on Twitter at Ingleside Review. See you next time.